I regard the treasures of Uzbekistan's cultural heritage as a unique project that has no parallel in any other country. Art has no nationality. Art has always praised universal human qualities. Our heritage is unbelievably rich, and it has also spread around the world. This is quite understandable because it is popular in other cultures. The State Museum of Oriental Art was founded in 1918, and in its almost 100-year history, it has become one of the major centers studying the culture and arts of Asia and North Africa. The museum's exhibits are held in a historical monument. During the fire of 1812, the building burned to the ground. Only after the victory over Napoleon was an Italian architect named Domenico Ghilardi able to restore it. The building was owned by General Fyodor Lunin, uncle of the famous Decembrist Mikhail Lunin. The Lunins had lived there right up until the revolution. Since that time, its walls have witnessed major events, but today they keep the priceless historical and cultural heritage of the East. From its early years, the museum has gathered collections of the arts of Uzbekistan. Whether that be Neolithic artifacts, luxurious gold decorations, or works of Uzbek artists. Boris Denike, a major Russian researcher of the East, pioneered these collections. In 1924, when he was director of the museum, upon visiting Central Asia for the first time, he decided to make the first archaeological expedition to Uzbekistan, to the settlement of Old Termes, located on the bank of the Amudarya, on the border between Uzbekistan and Afghanistan. According to Edvard Rutveladze, academician of Uzbekistan's Academy of Sciences, Boris Denike was aware of the possibilities Uzbekistan presented for research and expanding the museum's fund. And right from the start, it became evident that this land had unique artifacts. A huge undertaking was made during the 3 main operational seasons. 2 monuments were discovered there that later became world famous. These were Karatepe, a Buddhist cave monastery, and the palace of the Termes governors of the 11th and the 12th centuries. This is a reconstruction of a hall of a Buddhist cult center consisting of a few monasteries. It was found in the settlement of Old Termes. This is the territory of ancient Bactria, and it was built in the 1st century AD. You completely lose all sense of time and space there. Clay and Ganj sculptures, as well as fragments of paintings decorating the monastery, are still found here. Dr. Tigran Mikirtichev took part in the excavations in Karatepe in subsequent years. This was a joint expedition. Experts from the State Hermitage Museum as well as Samarkand Museum and our own museum took part in it. This was a joint archaeological expedition that lasted over 30 years. Karatepe is a staging area on the way from India to China. I imagine that this was the place where Buddhist cult architecture began to form. For instance, the cave that was first moved from India to Bactria in Uzbekistan and later on to China. Old Termes, or Tarmit, as it was called, was not just a religious center, but also the center of the caravan trade. No wonder that perfectly formed red clay pots were found here. Some of them display ornamentation. Monks who lived and meditated in the monastery may have eaten or drunk from them. Gradually, towards the end of the 4th century, the monastery fell into disrepair, and when the Arabs came here in the 7th century, it was already a ruin. But unique artifacts were still to be found. Fragments of clay and Ganj sculptures are the star of the museum's collection. They demonstrate the great skills of the unknown sculptures of ancient Bactria, who even in the 3rd century could depict the place, ethnic type and emotions of their characters so vividly and accurately. Bodhisattva's head wearing a turban is a classic of Buddhist sculpture of that time. What is more interesting is that, despite many studies, Buddha's characters remain mysterious in their own way. And it is also the place where the unique exhibit, Buddha's head, is kept, with a mysterious and amazing smile resembling that of Mona Lisa. The ancient sculpture was generous in gilding the god's face. The archaeological heritage of Uzbekistan is quite diverse. That rectangular ossuary was meant for Zoroastrian funeral rites. It was found in the settlement of Durman Tep near Samarkand and dates back to the 7th century. This was the time of the Sogdian state in what is modern Uzbekistan. Varaksha Palace near Bukhara, the walls of which were covered with rich Ganj decorations and narrative paintings, was another Sogdian monument. A man's head. This may be a portrait of a governor of Bukhara in the 7th or the 8th centuries. They were known as Bukhar Khudas. A lion's head, a fragment of a composition of hunting scenes. Sogdian sculptures deserve recognition for mastering the secret of sculpture that sets no limits on the imagination. Along with the materials from archaeological expeditions in Uzbekistan, the collections of the museum were supplemented with purchases and gifts from private collections. This was mainly glazed ceramics of the medieval period. The early Islamic period opened up new horizons in decorative expression. Inscriptions with wishes as well as aphorisms were often to be found, serving as a moral compass. Here are some of them. Indeed, safety lies in silence, or abandoning your desires is the noblest wealth of all. They are rendered in a gorgeous script known as floral kufi. Calligraphy, which is woven into the fabric of the ceramic pieces, and their images also conveys a certain mood, because each item of the decorative and applied arts exhibited in the museum makes us think of the craftsman who created it. We can feel the era and the spiritual pursuits of a particular historical period. Professor Kamala Kilova, PhD in History of Art, a leading expert in decorative and applied arts. Her comments are quite interesting and help us better understand folk art. They say the tree grew in the east, but where are its roots? Traditional Uzbek crafts originate in the ancient past. As far back as the early 20th century, in 1900s, the works of Uzbek masters gained the top honor of the Universal Exposition held in Paris. And this is no surprise because even today, we still admire the refinement, color, and pure decorative delight of the works. The collection of the State Museum of Oriental Art has rare examples of the ancient ceramics as well as the items of later times. These are glazed utensils produced by the main potteries of Uzbekistan, Fergana, Bukhara, Khorazm. The majority consists of the blue ceramics of Rishtan. This is a settlement located between Fergana and Kokand. The transparent glazing covering the utensils was prepared by masters of the 19th century from herbs and other natural components. Inscriptions on the white background were made with a thin brush. Unique items were known as chini. Blue and dark blue inscriptions of floral motifs had marks like Chinese porcelain. The masters of centers located between Bukhara and Samarkand preferred colored utensils painted on the brown background. Like this ceramic bowl, tavok, made in the latter half of the 19th century in Kishlovan. By the time the Timurid dynasty took power, Uzbek masters had already mastered marble carving. The museum collection has two flat bowls, lagans, made of the famous Gazgan marble found in the branches of Nurata mountains. Such lagans would be offered to diplomats and were considered a luxury item in Russia. They are decorated with inscriptions in Arabic and Persian, God's sentences, Allah's wishes, and an Eastern quatrain, Rubai. Complicated floral compositions, great artistry, diversity of floral motifs. These are famous wedding curtains, Suzani. This is one of the most precious collections of the museum. Each of the embroidery represents national spiritual symbols, the people's thoughts on gardens and bloom in fragrant flower gardens, on the sacred sense of celestial bodies in repeated life cycles. The best parts of the embroidery were made in the early 19th and 20th centuries. This is the style masters in Bukhara, Samarkand, Shahrisabz, Tashkent, Pskent, and Fergana used to embroider during their time, but there were certain traditions observed in each region. The unique Suzani was a peacock, late 18th, early 19th century. Masterful embroidery, 4 pairs of peacocks, a good wish for newlyweds. Suzani designs were drawn by a specially hired artisan, Kalamkash, whose craft was handed down through the generations, and this design was later used as an example of embroidery to be taken in each household. Girls in Uzbekistan were traditionally trained how to embroider from the age of 5 or 6, and girls had to prepare their dowry themselves. Making Suzani, Nim Suzani, Roijo, different kinds of embroidery, was a rite involving members of the family and sometimes even neighbors. When it was over, a ram was slaughtered and a sacrifice was made. And this meant these were not just independent acts, they made a single whole that was handed down from generation to generation, from century to century on. Fancy needlework was used to decorate go-to-meeting robes of semi-silk adras, silk fabrics, shoyi, and satin. Gorgeous velvet robes take pride of the collection. This robe of Bukhara's nobleman is called precious. It is stitched with gold threads all over. Gold stitch details were used to decorate both velvet and textile robes. Sometimes horses' harnesses of rich people were also stitched with gold, because since the beginning of the time in the East, there had been a cult of a horseman. The costume showed the social class of its owner. This attire with a luxury zebe gardon, a breast lace, belonged to a woman of an upper class. Europeans coming to Turkestan were astonished at the clothes. But before that time, the great Alisher Navo'i had admired them. A supple branch of green, a sweet smile on her face, she came into him. Her attire was of blue silk, breathing the freshness of sandal, her sandal skirts swishing. The wedding attire included attire, the laqash, literally translated as gold brows, as well as earrings, bracelets, and numerous amulets. This Khwarezm amulet, Tagyaduzi, decorated the neck part of a girl's hat she wore before getting married. Khwarezm items have astounding and mysterious shapes. Badam Oy, almond and moon. This is the name of the pendant for a headdress. Bright corals naturally complement this swishing fine gold leaves. Uzbek jewelers, zargars, were great masters of various decoration techniques. They used gilding and blacking, engraving and stamping, incrustation with colored metals, and delicate filigree. The boast of the collection is a Karakalpak wedding headdress, saukele. It is a helmet-like hat trimmed with black velvet and heavily decorated with lines of gorgeous corals. First of all, that meant an averter. Corals cover the forehead and temples going down to the nose and ears, the easiest ways for demons to enter. The melodic ringing of the long pendants and silver beads of the lace had to scare dark forces, saving women from the evil eye. But there is another version. One of them implies saukele tradition dating back to the period of Karakalpak people's ethnogenesis, when they included Saka Masaget people in their ideas. This is the latter half of the first millennium BC. This is high antiquity when Karakalpak girls were warriors. Citadels of the ancient cities of Uzbekistan, Bukhara, Khiva, Kokand, Tashkent and Samarkand were famous for mizgyars, coppersmith. This silver enameled and encrusted tray was made in Bukhara in the beginning of the 20th century. The manufacture date and the inscription Holy Bukhara in the round cartouche speak for the fact. The main part of the metal decorations were engraving and delicate carving, less often hammering. Kumgans and bowls with water, dashui, were used for ritual ablutions. The most widely spread copper utensils were various chai dishes, jugs for heating water. The best examples go back to the 19th century. Teapots were also produced then in Uzbekistan. They became a permanent feature of Uzbek life and were used both as intended and as a decoration of rich houses. The handle cover of the jug off top has a name of the master, Nizamuddin. He was one of the finest Fergana masters of his time. The jug is decorated with fine engraving, incrustation, turquoise and glass. The State Museum of Oriental Art has a large collection of paintings by Uzbek artists of the 20th century. They are representatives of the so-called Turkestan avant-garde of the 1920s and 1930s. This was the time of ardent searches for new forms of figurative language as well as new ideas. The avant-garde was buzzing with such dynamism, strong and diverse. Artists who created their works at the time, changing art, were pure geniuses. Doima Rahmanbetova, an artist, spent 20 years in Paris. She painted hundreds of paintings inspired by the works of the old Uzbek masters. They hit the big time at the Paris private viewings. One of the first works purchased by the museum was a painting by Uzbekistan-born Alexander Volkov. He admirably mastered modernism trends of the European art and created his own style, his unique signature style. His painting, Kishlak, was created at the beginning of the 1920s. A group of artists from Moscow and St. Petersburg were sent there at that time. Their mission was to develop fine arts in the Republic. Both the old Samarkand with medieval monuments, mosques, vaults, and the faces of the Russian artists making up the Union Masters of the New East were captured in pictures. Alexander Nikolaev, a man of extraordinary and surprising fate, was among them. He came to Samarkand when he was young and cast in his lot with Uzbekistan, converting to Islam and changing his name. The world of art knows him as Usta Mumin. The East struck me with its fabulousness. The uncommonness of its ways cast a spell on me with its delicateness, the artist wrote. His works, Bridegroom and Rejoicing with a Pomegranate, just like the rest of his paintings, were not just a tribute to the Oriental exotica. This was achieving a union with the ancient Uzbek culture. He was an enchanted wanderer. That land attracted him with its inmost depth of the alien culture that nevertheless engulfed him. And she revealed her secrets to him, secrets that were not to be forgotten. He was a man of spirit. He was a man of sublime beauty. And when he got to know the East, his subtlety, acumen, and spirit just manifested themselves and were reflected in his paintings. This might be the reason for that dragging feeling that comes each time we look at his pictures. Pavel Binkov was another artist of the amazing great play art working in Uzbekistan. When he came to Uzbekistan, he had dozens of years of mature works behind him. Russian Academy, years of teaching, traveling around France, Spain and Italy. In 1911, his works were exhibited in Paris, along with the pictures of such great Russian artists as Valentin Sirov and Ilya Repin. But it was in Uzbekistan where he created his best impressionistic works. I painted my pictures not in my workshop, but right there and then when I saw this or that scene, the artist used to say. He admired the ancient architecture of Uzbekistan. Motley crowds in the street, cozy shady patios in Bukhara and Samarkand. Binkov is light. I would say Binkov is beautiful shadows. No one can paint as fine and ethereal shadows as he does. Though many artists still keep trying, I think you cannot copy Binkov. You can only feel him, study him. Akmal Nur, who had a certificate of Binkov Art School, as well as Tashkent Theatre and Arts Institute, immediately became a very popular artist, developing a reputation of a sentimentalist. I Practice the Religion of Love was the name of his personal exhibition. He is often called an avant-gardist. He has lots of avant-garde works. Both bright and refined, they impress with a stretch of imagination and poetry in them. Ural Tansikbayev's landscapes are also regarded as masterpieces of Uzbekistan's art legacy. The museum bought his work Nomad Camp in 1934 after the exhibition of Uzbek artists in Moscow. We have to be proud of such high-ranking pieces of art to be created and now exhibited in museums, not just kept in the archives, but exhibited. The whole world can see them and become familiar with our culture. The rich collection of Uzbekistan's arts in the State Museum of Oriental Art is an inherent and significant part of the national cultural heritage. From the dazzling colors, apparel and embroidery up to the shimmering decorations. From the mysterious smiles of ancient sculptures up to the explicit delight of the Russian painters. These make the heart of our land. An echo of the limitless expanse of Uzbekistan and its age-long traditions. I hope you'll agree. This was the project, Treasures of Uzbekistan's Cultural Heritage in Museums of the World. You were guided by Shahnoza Ganieva. Thank you for your attention.